So welcome to the Deal Finders Corner. So this is your weekly property talk show brought to you by Property Filter, hosted by myself, Guillaume Black, your favorite Frenchman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Property Filter, the UK highest-rated platform to find deals. And we're on a mission to empower property investors and deal sourcers on our platform to find 1,000 deals this year alone, thanks to the Property Filter blueprint. And the purpose with those Deal Finders Corners is to give you more and the best of the available resources, where we invite expert guests that will share with you the latest and most current strategies and tactics when it comes to what works right now when it comes to finding deals, making deals, and the reality of systemizing and running a high-performance business in property. So it really is my pleasure, my immense pleasure, to introduce you my good friend Martin Rapley in today's Deal Finder Corner. Martin is going to share with us some strategies around how to appraise profitable property deals, so very current with what we are doing right now. And a little bit about Martin. So Martin started out working on site some 30 years ago now. He's an experienced quantity surveyor, project manager. He ran his own construction company, construction business for a while, and started delivering projects for property investors. And it became pretty apparent for him that many of those investors lacked support from someone with his skills and knowledge. I guess it's a polite way of saying that they have no idea what they are doing. And so some 10 years ago now, in 2013, he wound up his construction business and focused on a construction consultant role for property investors. And since so he's an investor himself, and together with Sarah, they have a portfolio of flats and HMOs in the southeast, in Kent and the wider area there. And since 2016, Martin has also been teaching property investors how to effectively manage their refurbs and conversions, and effectively sharing and making accessible his 30 years of experience to help those investors grow their portfolio. So as I said at the start, Martin is a very special guest for us today because he really helped me systemize my own property business a few years ago. I hired Martin and we had a few calls, and he helped me really streamline all my refurb process. So from all the procurement, the tendering, the schedule of works, the specifications, the management of change process, the contract management, all the way to the snagging on the other side. So we really are in for some treat today. And today, Martin will go over how to add value to a property, what makes a good profitable refurbishment project, why you should not trust an estate agent judgment. I'm looking forward to hear about this one. What are the risks you may not be aware when you go into a refurbishment project? What consultants can help you make the best offer, and why you need to get those consultants on board before you even get a deal. And we'll have some exclusive Q&A with Martin. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about Martin's talk today. So please give a massive virtual Property Filter welcome to Martin Rapley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. It's really good to be here. And perhaps you can just let me share my screen and I can do some slides for you as well. But yeah, good to meet you all here. I'm an active user. In fact, Sarah, my wife's more of an active user of the Property Filter platform than I am, but we're certainly seeing the benefits of it ourselves. Although, as Guillaume says, we are investing in property. We have fits and starts in our property investing. And at the moment, we're just spending a little bit more time and effort on our business side of things, but we will be back to property very, very soon. Here we go. I'm just getting in now. You might have spotted me padding there just whilst we got onto the screen. So the screen should be being shared now. So yeah, it's really good to be here. So thanks very much to Guillaume for inviting me on to speak to you guys. Listening to the things that Guillaume said I was going to cover, I think my PA has sent out a bit of a generic list of things I'll cover. I think I will cover all of that. It's probably not quite in the format that you necessarily expect to be covered, but we can definitely cover all of that off today. And as Guillaume says, I'll be around for some questions afterwards as well. I'd like to remind people whenever I go speaking that in reality, as a property investor, you're not going to do a great deal of investing without actually needing to do a refurbishment at some point. Now, at the moment, some of you may just be sourcing deals, and maybe you're sourcing deals and passing them on to other people. So I accept that right at this moment, you may not be refurbishing things. Some of you may be focusing more on a rent-to-rent type strategy. rent to HMO strategy and not be refurbishing. But pretty certain that whatever your strategy is now, if it doesn't include refurbishment, the likelihood is that you will at some point be doing some refurbishment, because most people I speak to that build up rent-to-rent businesses eventually have some capital to get invested in property. Most people that are doing sourcing eventually build up capital to actually spend it on their own property. So in reality, what I'm talking about is absolutely relevant for everyone that's on the call today. And indeed, it's relevant wherever you are in your property investing experience. If you are relatively new, if you're still looking for your first deal, there's definitely a good section in this talk that's going to help you appraise that deal a lot better than perhaps you are at the moment. Don't want to criticize what you're doing at the moment, but hopefully I've got some nuggets that will just help you appraise that deal slightly better than you are at the moment. If you're more experienced and perhaps have already bought some property, maybe even managed a refurbishment or something similar, then I've got some nuggets that may just close up some gaps in your knowledge. And as Guillaume said, I came into this environment 10 years ago now because I could see a lot of property investors had gaps in their knowledge that they didn't know were there, but I could see them as a building contractor working on the other side. And had I been of that mindset, I probably could have made a huge amount of profit from some of these property investors that really, didn't know some of the things that I know. The circumstances never really came around in the end, because I only worked for property investors probably for about 6 months or so before I decided it was time to move on to something else. So wherever you are in property investing, I've got something for you in this talk today. I started building up my community, as Guillaume says, in 2016 when I started doing some training. And I asked my community back in, probably 2017 or so, what was their biggest concern about refurbishments? Really so that I could get a feel as to who was in the community and who was I talking to. But in reality, what I've learned ever since then is that, just about every property investor has got the same concerns. The biggest concern that came out back in those days was actually finding good builders. How do I find good builders? Where do I find good builders? And I have to say, if I go networking anywhere, it's generally the first question I get asked: where do I find good builders? Or do you know any good builders? Can you recommend any builders? I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about how you can find some good builders. And importantly, I think perhaps the thing to say here is most builders are good. Sadly, some good builders are perceived as being bad builders by disorganized clients. And in what I'm going to talk to you about this morning, this afternoon, I'm going to hopefully ensure that you aren't one of those disorganized clients. The second biggest concern that my community had was losing money. Of course, we're all here to make money. Who doesn't want to make money? I'm going to give you lots of little tips as well along the way that will hopefully just tighten up some processes you've got at the moment and make them a little bit more profitable. And if you're starting from scratch, close those gaps up from the beginning. Everyone's concerned about builders taking too long. Time is money. Again, I've got a few little hints and tips there to help speed up or help you get a better understanding how long builders are going to take. And then the biggest thing that was a real surprise to me, and I suppose not necessarily a surprise, but just an acknowledgement that a lot of property investors just acknowledged that they didn't really know how to manage a project from a commercial perspective. And the way I take this is, some of you may well have had a builder come round, they've built an extension on the back of your house, you've put a nice new kitchen in there, you've got a lovely new room. And in reality, if that's your own house, if it takes a little bit too long because you've changed your mind or you're a little bit disorganized with something, then it doesn't matter. You've got a few more takeaways until the kitchen's finished. You've got the kitchen finished, you're delighted. If you go over budget, you spend a little bit too much on your dream kitchen, you're going to be in the house for the next 5-10 years. You've got a great facility, you've got a nice new kitchen, you're going to forget that you overspent after no time at all. And in due course, it's probably going to add value to the property anyway. If you go into commercial project management, commercial refurbishment with that kind of mythology, and the mindset that, well, it doesn't matter if it runs late, it doesn't matter if I lose money. In the end, you are going to lose money, and this just does not work. And so I'm going to share with you some tips to help you just be more professional about what you're actually doing as far as managing refurbishments and things. As Guillaume said, I started in 1995. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was 1985 as a contractor's quantity surveyor. Got into project management and project managed quite a lot of projects in London. I'm based in Kent, so most of my working career I've been in London. I did a lot of projects. Some of them were not actually particularly huge. Some of them were not actually that difficult, but most of them had complications that added to them. I was the guy who got involved with the complicated projects. I worked in occupied museums. I worked in the Canary Wharf Tower. I worked in police stations. I've worked in the Bank of England. So places where the works weren't complicated, but the logistics of managing them were. And I was doing that for a number of contractors for a long time. But along the way, I also project managed lots and lots of residential property refurbishments, going back to the days when local authorities had huge rental portfolios. I was working for a building contractor or a couple of building contractors that were managing these projects. So the fax machine, for any of you that don't remember what a fax machine was, it whirred into action. Out came an instruction: go to this property and rehang the front door because the tenants pulled it off its hinges. The same kind of challenges that we now have as property investors. One of the things that we used to get in those schemes was what we used to call void turnarounds. And effectively, the tenant had moved out the property. We'd be given 2 weeks to go in there, new kitchen, new bathroom, coat of paint, freshen up anything that needed repairing, and hand the keys back again. So I've been managing properties for a long time from a construction perspective, and then switched over in 2013 and have a portfolio of HMOs and flats, mostly in Kent, although we've got a random block of flats in Wales, which is a completely different story. So I'm going to just go through these kinds of things in this talk. I've kind of covered this off already, and I'm going to do it in the way of when I kind of came into training property investors. When property investors started saying to me, look, Martin, you're great as a consultant, but on some of the small projects, it's just too expensive for us to employ you. Will you run some training courses? And I wasn't originally planning on doing training, but I got talked into running a training course by someone who effectively bought in a load of property investors, hired a room and brought me along to speak and present. And I started thinking, well, in all of my 20-something years experience, what makes some projects more successful than other projects? Why did I have some relatively easy projects to manage? And why did I have some that were just a nightmare from the beginning? And then when I got involved working later on with developers who are in a slightly different place from building contractors, what made their projects successful? And then when I've started being managing them for myself as a property investor and working with property investors, what made some projects better than others? And what I realized was that it really came down to just 4 elements. And what I worked out was that if you kind of got these 4 elements pretty good, you were well on the way to a successful project. Now, is it possible to have the ultimate project? Probably not. There's so many variances in a refurbishment project. There's so many things that may or may not happen. There's so many personalities, so many people, so much material that's got to be bought from here, there, and everywhere. It's really hard to get to, so we say 100%. You can certainly get well over 90% of the way to a successful project. And I think if you could pick up these 4 things that I'm going to talk about now, you are very close to 90%, and the rest is going to come with experience and come with just a little bit more learning and closing up some gaps along the way. I broke down this whole thing into a 4-part formula, and that's what I'm going to go through with you over the next 30 minutes or so. A plus S plus GB plus M will equal a successful project. Maybe not the utopia, but certainly well on the way to it. And I hope that in going through this with you now, some of you will pick up some nuggets that will help you close up some gaps in your knowledge. And if you are starting completely from scratch, then it will help you start from scratch in a better way and bring up and put together better processes. So the first part of the formula is A. A stands for appraisal. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Martin, I thought you were going to come along and talk about refurbishment here, and I absolutely am going to talk about refurbishment. But I have to say, the projects that I see go wrong for other property investors are nearly all of the projects where those investors have not done a thorough appraisal of the deal in the first place. And this is a really good place to start, of course, with the property filter platform, because of course that immediately that platform leads you into some kind of appraising. Once you've viewed properties, you've got talking to vendors in whichever format you are onto the realms of starting to appraise these deals. So some bullet points to help you with your appraisals. And the first thing to say is it's really important that you do your own due diligence, that you are assessing these properties from your context and with your desire. Estate agents' jobs are to sell properties on behalf of their clients. To some extent, they will tell you what they think you want to hear. And the first thing is, we know that estate agents believe that a property that needs refurbishing is a good deal for a property investor. It may not be. It may be good for a property investor, but it may not be right for you. There's no point in refurbishing a property and delivering it to the wrong market. There's no point in delivering a top-of-the-range penthouse apartment for the SA market in the wrong part of the town or city where people aren't staying, where there isn't an SA market at the high end, and it needs more of a utilitarian. And we know exactly the same relating to, there's no point in creating student accommodation if there isn't a university. There's no point in trying to convert a property into a high-end HMO in the poor part, the rough part of town, or the students' part of town for professionals. So you need to do your own due diligence, and you need to start to work out what you're looking to achieve and whether this property is necessarily going to be the right property for you. And if it's an estate agent says to you, oh, you can refurbish this property for £30,000, you need to go away and do some research and see if £30,000 is the right figure. And if that same estate agent says, oh, and after you finish the refurbishment, it will be worth £50,000 more, then you need to go away and do your own research to establish whether that statement is correct as well. Because what frequently estate agents do is the £30,000 is the bare minimum you're going to spend to get it habitable, but the £50,000 value uplift is actually taking it to the top of the range. And actually, if you wanted to get that £50,000 value uplift, in some properties, you've actually got to spend £60,000 to get there. And it's up to you to establish that before you buy the property. Because if you're paying too much for the property, you're forced to cut corners elsewhere. And as soon as you cut corners elsewhere, that's when things start to go wrong for you. It's because you cut corners with the quality of the builder, now things are falling apart and your tenants are living in the property, or your guests are visiting and things are breaking and you're spending a premium fixing them. Or because you were forced to cut some corners, you've used cheap quality products and now you're having to carry out more repairs. So do be really careful about the kinds of research you're doing, but do some real research. And it needs to be more than just what you're given on face value by estate agents. So in many respects, there's three ways of making making money, making profit from refurbishing property. The first way is we buy the property, we refurbish it, so we add value to it, and then we rent it out to tenants. So those tenants actually pay us rent on a monthly basis, and we get our profit in a small amount every single month. The other thing we could do is we can buy a property, we can refurbish it, and we can sell it. And once we've sold it, we get a nice lump of profit, comes out in one big go, and we can reinvest some of that, or we can live on some of that, or we can do whatever we want to do. So the first one is very much a cash flow kind of process. The second one is a profit kind of process. One gives us monthly income, the other one gives us a lump sum at the end. And then there's a bit of a hybrid between the two, which would be when we buy a property, we refurbish it, we refinance it and get some, or maybe even all of our money out if we're lucky, and then we get a slightly smaller amount of profit every single month over a longer period. Now, you need to know what is right for you. If you can generate a really good cash flow, you may decide that it's worth spending a bit more money on the refurbishment in the first place, and possibly even spending more money than the whole finished project is worth. Because if you're going to hold that property for the next 10, 15 years and the cash flow is brilliant, it doesn't matter if you spend a bit too much money up front. However, if you're going to sell that property, there is no way you want to be spending too much money up front, because you're never going to sell it and make a profit. So different schemes have got different outcomes. And just because one property investor says it doesn't work for them doesn't necessarily mean that it won't work for you. That property investor who saw that property and said no to it might want profit, whereas you want cash. And they might have thought they were going to use it as student accommodation, whereas you've realised it works better as white-collar workers or something like that. So just because someone else has said no doesn't mean you should say no. But just because someone else has said yes to it also doesn't mean you should beat yourself up and think that you've missed a deal, because it could well be that they were looking at it from a different metric. And importantly, it could be that they completely messed up their figures because they hadn't done the research that you'd done, and they've actually ended up overpaying for the deal in the first place. It's really important that you use realistic figures to calculate the cost of doing the refurbishments. And this is another place where I see a lot of property investors make a bit of a slip up. It's very easy to squeeze the refurbishment out of what we've got left. So it's very easy to say, well, I'm buying the property at 200,000. It's worth 250 when I've refurbished it. So I've got to refurbish it for 50,000. That is actually back to front way. And I just want to sow the seeds with you how developers think about this from a different perspective. And that is that we start with the end value. The end value is £250,000. We then deduct off the costs to get to that end value. We want a line of profit, probably. We've got a cost of appointing a builder to do the building work. Maybe we need an architect in there and a structural engineer and building control surveyors and a few other consultants. So we deduct all of those costs off. From there, we then deduct off some finance costs. We deduct off our costs for acquiring the property in the first place, and the cost of, and legals and things like that. And so we start at the top, we deduct all of those costs off, and the figure we're left with is our maximum price that we can offer for the property. Notice that that is actually nothing to do with the price that the property is on the market for. Some properties are worth way more as a residential house than you will ever calculate it's worth, perhaps as a flip project, or maybe as an HMO or something like that. And you need to be walking away from those. My advice to get realistic figures, two ways really to get realistic figures, and I'll tell you a way not to get them. First off, the best way to get realistic figures is actually to learn for yourself the cost of things. And the way to learn is to talk to someone who runs training courses and does one-to-one training to help property investors learn how to cost up refurbishments. exactly the kind of training I can help you with. The advantage of you learning is you go and look at a property at 10 o'clock in the morning, then you go and sit and have a cup of tea, you run your numbers by 11 o'clock in the morning, you know where you are. You're not relying on anyone else to get involved. Now, that will be slow start. It will take you a few projects to get your head into it, but in the longer term, it will help you view way more projects, help you put way more offers in, and also get your offers way more accurate. Now, if you don't want to pay to get educated straight away, that's not a problem. I'm not going to hold it against you. A resource where you will always get some good costings, not lots of detail, but you will get lots of costings, is YPN magazine, Your Property Network magazine. There's case studies in there every single month. If you read the case studies, make sure you understand the context of things. But what you'll find is the investors in there have broken down their prices, and you can read this report, and you'll read a report about someone who refurbished a 5-bedroom house, and the plastering cost them £9,000, and you can now abstract that to your house. Well, my house is going to be a little bit smaller than that, so I'm going to pay a little bit less than £9,000. So you can start building up your own database of realistic figures to use to do your appraisals. The place I would advise you not to go to get realistic figures at this stage is talking to builders. And you might say, well, surely you've got to talk to builders to know the price. Here's the problem with talking to builders at this stage. First of all, any builder that you're showing a property that you don't own is immediately going to be thinking, well, I'm wasting my time here. What's the chances of A, this investor buying the opportunity, B, them getting their offer accepted, and then C, me winning the job when they eventually come around to do the refurbishment in 3, 4, 5 months' time. And so most builders will not spend any time at all getting accuracy in their figures. They will be saying it will be about £50,000. It will be about £60,000, which is fine, except they're not spending enough time to look deeply to get everything right. The other thing is builders generally are property investors. So if you show a builder a property and you say, I want to convert it into an HMO, a lot of them won't even understand what an HMO is. You might say you want some extra en suites, but will they necessarily remember to include for a fire alarm system? Will they necessarily realise that the kitchen is going to be more than you might need in a family home? Maybe not. So you're relying on someone who doesn't know the market and also doesn't know the standard that you want to get your project to give you a price. And the other thing is, builders are much better at pricing from a document. I'm going to come on to this shortly. They really need more information than you walking around saying, fix this, change the door, repaint this, put a new kitchen in, and 4 en suites. That's not going to help them give you a particularly accurate price. So my advice is always, learn for yourself. If not, use YPN magazine, which is a really good resource. You could obviously talk to other property investors. The more you learn for yourself, the quicker you will be able to turn around all of these appraisals that you're doing. I touched at the beginning of this section saying that the perception of estate agents is that if the property needs refurbishing, it's a good deal for property investors. It isn't always a good deal for property investors. And I would encourage you to look away from properties that need a light refurbishment. If it needs a light refurbishment, i.e. a family can buy the house, move in, even if they're camping in the living room for a few weeks, with family parties, stripping wallpaper, decorating, freshening it all up, there are young families particularly who will buy their dream home in a good area that's really run down. So they'll buy a rundown home in a good area, near the station, near the park, near the schools, everything that they want. They are buying with their heart. They will pay way more than you can ever offer to make money from these properties. because they are buying with their heart. They'll have family working parties round to help them refurbish it. Ideally, you need to be looking at properties that are at the cusp of being uninhabitable, because that's going to see off your biggest competitor at this end of the market. And the thing about estate agents is the estate agent will be talking to you, and they'll be talking to the private owner, and they'll say to the private owner, I've got a price, I've got an offer from a property investor of £200,000, and the private owner will say, well, I really want this house. I think I could go to £202,000. And the estate agent will come back to you and say, the other people have offered 202. Do you want to offer more? My advice is get out of the bidding war at that point. If it's right for a private owner, they're always going to outbid you, or they're going to see you get up to such a silly price that you're going to be paying far too much for it. So be very, very careful with that. The whole thing about doing an appraisal is have something on paper. Now, if you don't like Excel, look away for a minute or so. Personally, I love Excel. I know if I get up in the morning and I open an Excel spreadsheet, it's going to be a good day. I get excited with Excel spreadsheets. Even if you're not good at Excel, maybe you need to work with someone who is, or maybe you need to get acquainted with Excel or similar alternatives. The key thing is, I would encourage you to put together your own deal appraisal sheet. This is actually a very old, out-of-date one of mine relating to doing HMOs. I've got more complex ones now. I see a lot of property investors sharing deal appraisal sheets. My concern about that is that it's very easy to overtype formulas, and you lose the continuity. So put together a deal appraisal sheet. You've got it. You can always refer back to it. The second part of the formula is S. S stands for specification, schedule of works, scope of works, spec, all sorts of combinations. They all start with S. This is actually a document that sets out what you need to do to the property. This is in your hands. This is how you start outlining how you're going to take this rundown family house and turn it into your dream investment property, be that an HMO, a single let, a serviced accommodation unit, whatever that is. This is how you set it down. Remember, no one else in the process actually gets the benefit from this in the longer term. It's only you in the longer term that gets the benefit of this. Therefore, if the wrong things are specified, it's you that doesn't get the rent, or you that isn't able to sell the property to a guest at the right rate, or you're getting negative feedbacks, or whatever goes on. This is the document that helps you understand what you're doing to the property. But it also helps other people understand what you want to do to the property. And some of these other people seriously need to know what you're doing to the property. For instance, could be your business partner. It may be that you've got a business partner and you need to discuss and agree between you what you're doing to this property. It's all right saying we're going to put in a new kitchen, but what type of kitchen are we putting in? Are we putting in white doors? Are we putting in a coloured door? Are we putting in the recessed panels? What kind of worktop are we doing? What quality tiles are we doing? So it forces you to talk to your business partner. You can also show this document to your investors. If you showed a document that specified what you were going to do with a project to an investor, do you think there's more chance they would invest in you? Of course, it's going to take some risk away from them. It's going to give you credibility. If you could send it to your broker, so that your broker sends it on to a mortgage lender or a commercial lender, and again you demonstrate to them that you've got credibility and you know what you are actually going to do with all of the money when it turns up. And then finally, the last group of everyone is builders. If you are able to give to a builder a specification or a schedule of works, it's for want of a better thing, it's the same thing. It's not quite. In building terms, there is a subtle difference, but let's assume it's the same thing. If you gave a document to the builders that gave them a list of what you want them to do, you are immediately going to go up in their credibility, in their estimation. They're going to see you as being more credible. If you start showing builders around a property with no specification, that is the time where builders are going to say, really sorry, I'm too busy to price. They're going to give you lump sum, all-inclusive prices because there was no clarity around what they were being asked to price for. And so that project that might only need to be £30,000 will easily get priced at 50. They'll come at it with a view that, well, I'm not entirely sure they know what they need, but for £50,000, I can probably give them everything they're after. Whereas if you put together a schedule of works, you will now get builders wanting to work with you. Builders will see a schedule of works and they'll say, well, they'll say to themselves, they won't say to you, they'll say, well, I know I'm going to be in competition, but at least I know all of my competition have got the same starting point as me, and I know I can win jobs on a fair and square platform. Whereas if you're just walking builders around a property, who knows what one might remember, one might forget, and who knows how they interpret things. So this is such an important document. It's the most important document, really, to ensure that the project is going to run successfully. And you need to be starting to think about what goes in this document, very early on as part of your appraisal, because the appraisal needs to take account of the quality of fixtures and fittings and the quantity of work that you're thinking you need here, when you're putting this down in writing. I've already touched on the point that the builders are not generally property investors. So as a result, they need to know what you need in your property, particularly compliance issues, fire alarms and things like that, means of escape in some properties. Those are really, really important, perhaps emergency lighting in other properties. And it's up to you to establish what you need and tell the builder what you need. If you don't know what you need, then you need to be talking to a consultant. That consultant might be an architect, might be a project manager like myself. On a more technical basis, it could be a structural engineer, say, if there's some structural cracks to deal with. So you need to go and get the expert knowledge from the expert, and then that knowledge goes down to the contractor. Remember, contractors follow instructions. The instructions are the architect's drawings, the structural engineer's details, your specification or schedule of works. Builders, apart from in their own properties, do not want to be left making decisions because they are paranoid they will get them wrong. So don't even ask them to make decisions. Ask them some advice, of course, but don't ask them to make the decision. And the whole thing here with putting together a specification or a schedule of works is to start planning your project early. I see a lot of property investors, and you probably do as well, social media on a Friday afternoon, the cheesy picture outside the front door of a property with the keys. I've just bought this property, the builder starts on Monday. Now, it is perfectly possible, and I have done this, to collect the keys on a Friday and have the builder in there on Monday. However, only if you can get access during the purchase period to show builders around, well, to put together a schedule of works and then show builders around. And sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes there's the owners won't let you get back in there. The estate agents won't accompany you. If you cannot get access to that property until the day you collect the keys, then that's the day you write your schedule of works and then you start looking for builders. You might say to me, Martin, but I don't want to lose 3-4 weeks sorting all of that out and having no work going on. I want the builder to start the first day I can get him in there. I guarantee that if you spend 3-4 weeks getting your plan in order, getting your specification right, tendering the process properly to builders, you will save 6 weeks at the back end. You'll also save a huge amount of your stress and probably keep more of your hair as a result. So I encourage you to start planning early, but take it nice and steady and add some time in to get this right if you need to. You probably aren't thinking of putting gold-plated toilets in any of your properties right this moment, but it serves as a really good example. Look at this toilet here. Look at this plumbing. This is probably plumbing that is different from what you've got in the toilet in your house. If you turn up with this toilet partway through the project and say to the builder, I've bought the toilet, I want this gold one, the builder might say to you, oh, that's a bit of a pity because the plumber did all of his work last week and he hasn't put in the pipe in the right place to come for this toilet to be fitted in. So what I'm going to have to do now is I'm going to have to get the plumber back. He's going to charge a minimum of a half day to do this alteration, plus there's some materials. That's going to cost you £200. £200 that is a legitimate charge because you've changed your mind or you've moved the goalposts, but that's £200 out of your wallet, straight off to the builder and the plumber. £200 off your bottom line, £200 off your profit, all because you weren't organised in advance and told the plumber that you wanted the gold-plated toilet, which had the odd plumbing arrangement on it. The other thing is, if you know you want a gold-plated toilet, which, by the way, you can buy, they're on something like 6 weeks delivery. Now, if you've just agreed with a builder that the works are going to take 4 weeks, a 6-week delivery toilet's no use to you. If you turn up and say to the builder, I found the toilet, I want the gold-plated one, he says, well, hold on, I told you I was going to finish in 3 weeks' time, and the toilet's going to take 6 weeks to get hold of. If you thought about it up front, you buy the toilet in advance. Before the builder starts, you've got it sitting in the shed at home, ready to run round when the builders are actually on site. So not expecting you put gold-plated toilets in your properties, but it serves as a reminder. And the same applies to the tiles. I'm not going to talk about the tiles at the moment. We'll do some questions later on with the spare time that we've got. The third part of the formula is GB. That stands for good builder. And generally, there are lots and lots and lots of very good builders out there. But sadly, some of them are perceived as being bad builders by what I would consider is a bad client. A client that inadvertently has not given the builder the opportunity to succeed. Now, if you have if you've done a good appraisal in the first place, with all the right costs allocated, you can now afford the good quality builder. If you've got a schedule of works or a specification, you are now talking to builders that want to give you a good competitive price and want to deliver a good service to you. So the 2 previous bits help build into this section as well. But I want to remind you that you get what you pay for as far as builders are concerned. And just a reminder, you may not know this. It surprises me how many people overlook this point. There is no law in this country that says you have to appoint the cheapest builder. You need to be appointing the best builder. Now, the best builder may be slightly more expensive, but actually you think his quality of work is better. The best builder might be slightly more expensive, but actually he's going to finish it 4 weeks earlier than the cheaper builder, which means you can then move tenants in 4 weeks earlier, or rent, or start using your property for guests or whatever you're going to do. So price should not be your sole driver. And personally, I would rather have a nice, quick builder that works to a really high standard and pay a small premium for that. This is personally, than have a cheap builder that does things to a poor standard. Don't know about the duration of work, but poor standards break. Poor standards don't allow me to get the best rent for my building. So I personally, price is not the driver for me. But do remember, you get what you pay for. If you've got 3 prices for a project, one of them is £50,000, one of them's £48,000, and one of them's £32,000, my brain would be saying something's wrong with 32. If 2 builders think it's around about £50,000, something's wrong with the other one. That if you engage the builder that's £32,000 and he has made a mistake, he'll either come back to you and say, first of all, he might start cutting some corners. So he'll look for ways he can cut corners to save some money. And then he might be forced to come back to you and say, actually, I've made a huge mistake in this price I've given you. I've missed out a load of work. I've forgotten how to do it. I need to add on some more money, and it's £53,000. And so someone that looked like the lowest and the best in the first place is now not. So do some research into the prices you get and be cautious of any builder where their price is considerably lower than the others. The best way to find some builders, a couple of good ways to find builders, walking around the streets local to where your project is. Look for sign-written vans, look for signboards up in the windows. Talk to those builders, see what they're doing, engage with them. If you feel that you could work with them, then follow them up and get them to price the project. If you start speaking to them and you can't understand what they're talking about, if you don't like them, don't bother trying to work with them. Don't even put them on the list in the first place. You want to get to a point where you've got quite a good sized list, maybe 8, 10 builders. You choose the best 5 or 6 to get prices from, and you should get 4 prices back from those. The mistake I see a lot of property investors making is they talk to 2 builders, they get 2 prices, but one builder now can't do the job. So we're forced to take the best of the only builder that's left. And sometimes they're not the best builder. Another way to find builders is we can get on the internet, of course. We can Google for builders in our town. You'll find builders' websites come out of search engines very easily. Do a little bit of research. Some of those companies near the top of the list are going to be big companies with big overheads, big offices in the high street or wherever. They may be too big for some of your projects. They're going to be too expensive. You're going to find lots of small companies come out of there, often with fairly basic websites. I wouldn't worry about a basic website at all. That's all fine. So do some research, do some due diligence, you'll get those. You'll also find some directory sites online, like the old-fashioned yellow pages. Use those to get started, but remember there's been no due diligence done on any of the companies that are advertising on those portals. So you've got to start from scratch, like we would have done 20 years ago when we had a yellow pages. And then the other thing you're going to find are things like Rated People, Trusted Trader, Checker Trade to some extent, but these kind of portals where there is an element of vetting and where companies can reply and will normally be paying for the lead to get work. So they're the easy ways to find builders, and they're still the ways that I'd say I find builders. I don't really. I've got a team that find builders for me now, but that's the way my team find builders. Good builders are still reasonably busy. There's no doubt that building is just starting to get a little bit easier, or finding builders is starting to get a little bit easier. A lot of the public are not spending money on their houses so much. They're not doing those kitchen extensions. Property investors are still investing, but builders are just getting a little bit slacker. But you will only find the good builders if you've got that good schedule of works and you're prepared to pay the right price for them in the first place. If you can't afford the good builders and you haven't got a schedule of works, then you're going to be ending up with the shoddy builders, and it's all going to backfire for you further down the line. So good builders are busy, but busy builders will happily work for a client that looks as though they're going to give them every opportunity to make money. And they do that with a schedule of works normally and quality drawings. And then I've just put on here that you get what you pay for. And those of you that are wide awake will say that's the same as the first one. I've put it on again because for me, it is so, so important. You need to be selecting the best builder, not the cheapest builder. And there's more metrics to best builder than just price. Price is good, of course. If you can get a good builder that is the cheapest, that's brilliant. The fourth and final part of the formula, just in the last few minutes, is management. Someone has to manage this project. And the project starts really from when you first view the property to the point that you move tenants in, or you start running your guest service accommodation business or whatever. The builders themselves will manage the building part, but remember there's more to it than just the building part. A question to ask yourself though is, do you have the expertise to manage this project? Do you know how to manage a refurbishment project, or do you need to outsource it to a project manager like me and my team? If you're going to outsource it to a project manager, then you need to factor in the cost of that in your initial appraisal. There's no point in paying 10 grand too much because you now can't afford the 10 grand project manager. Just taking a figure out of the sky there. So have you got sufficient expertise to manage it, or do you know someone you can outsource it to? If you weren't managing the project, what could you be doing with your time? Could you be running another business, say? Could you be sourcing more properties? Could you be getting finance? Could you be sitting on a beach with your feet up, with it all going on around you? So do consider whether it's right for you to be managing the property or the project, or whether you want to outsource it to someone else. If you are managing a property, you don't need to micromanage. I personally, my team, we only go to our projects at a maximum once a week. Unless there's a real crisis opens up all of a sudden, we will only go there once a week. If you feel that you need to be there more frequently than once a week, I would go back and say, well, did you write a good quality schedule of works specification in the first place? And did you appoint the right builder in the first place? Because it could be that the reason you're on site more than once a week is because actually you've slipped up on one of the early elements. If you're buying materials for the builder, make sure you agree the dates that they need things. If the builder says to you, I need the kitchen next Monday, you need to be getting it on site the previous Wednesday. Don't try and get it delivered on Monday, because what will happen is your kitchen will be the 4th delivery on Monday and turn up at 11 o'clock in the morning. 11 o'clock, by the way, is normally 2 hours after the kitchen fitter, who's standing there twiddling his thumbs, has got the hump that he's not going to earn any money for the day because you haven't got a kitchen on site. And by 9 o'clock, he's gone and got a cup of tea, gone down the cafe, realised that the kitchen's not there, and he's gone off and done someone else's job instead. So make sure that you always talk to the builders about when things are needed, and make sure you always massively exceed those target dates that they give you. And as I touched on earlier on, the whole thing here is about being organised in advance. You sometimes need to slow down to speed up. And what I've just taken you through here is something that does need to slow down to speed up. I have seen it time and time again. Trying to speed up and shortcut some of these principles will not save you any time, money, or sanity in the longer term. It will drive you mad and you will hate the whole process. So spend an extra couple of weeks up front planning and preparing, getting the right builder, and it will save you 4, 5, 6 weeks at the back end and a load of your time and effort. So that is the formula, nice and succinctly. Just as a summary, A for appraisal, so making sure you do your own quality appraisal with good quality prices put into it. Writing a specification or schedule of works, finding a good builder and doing your research and due diligence into finding a good builder, and considering the management and not managing things that are out of your depth, bringing in experts where you need to. A plus S plus GB plus M will give you a successful project. In fact, it will also give you profit minus the stress, minus the time. And ultimately, that is the full formula. If you want a stress-free, profitable project that doesn't take up hours of your time, then consider the appraisal, the specification, the builder, and the management. Just finally, before we finish, just to let you know, you're welcome to get in touch with me at any time, and I know we're going to unmute and we can talk about some more things. If you want to book a free call with me, just go to the website on there, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's a button at the top that says book a call, and it will take you to my diary. It'll find a 20-minute slot for you. There may not be anything for a couple of weeks because I'm a bit busy next week and I'm going on holiday the week after for a week. If all of this was completely new to you and you're starting from scratch and you want to know where and how can you get started, my book retails at $4.99. We just charge postage and packaging on that, and you can get hold of that on the refurbhandbook.co.uk page. Otherwise, I'd be delighted to talk to any of you at any time. Oh, there's free content, by the way, on YouTube and Facebook, so have a look on there as well. And I'm here for questions if anyone wants to ask me anything through Guillaume.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Martin. Thank you very much indeed for sharing all of that. I think it was very useful and insightful for most people on the call. I really like a good framework, a good equation. So thank you. You spoke my language here. The A plus S plus G plus M equals profit minus stress minus time. I love it. On the appraisal, so you guys know on Property Filter, you've got the deal calculators, but it will not detail, like the build cost. This is where you need to do the stuff that Martin, shares, about how to appraise, the build cost. Speak with Martin. Check the case studies in YPN. I think it's actually an awesome idea. And I think if you subscribe to YPN, you can even go back digitally, look at any copies they ever submitted. So there's a big database of things, you can go and have a look there. So that's, thanks a lot for sharing that. It was a really, really good idea. And don't buy just because there is a need to refurb, absolutely. And I thoroughly agree with what you say about light cosmetic refurbs. You're fighting against the masses, and it's too competitive. It's going to be a waste of time. And something I learned from you and you touched on today is not to bring your builder too early, before you've secured the property, because they waste their time, you waste you waste your time. And when we had a call and some consultation together, you actually explained to me the different stage and how to drip feed the whole information to the builder, from the tender stage to the onboarding stage, the post-tender meetings, the award meetings, and all the process we sort of mapped out. And it's how you give, like a telephone book worth of content and information to a builder in a way that is not overwhelming, and that they, it's drip fed to them and they get the stuff. So I think the bit about not taking the builders on the viewing because it's a waste of everybody's time is just the start to this wider and quite decent, game-changing subject I've learned from you. So yeah, that was interesting. And on the schedule of work and specification in the S section, so builders should not be asked to make decisions. That's probably the worst the worst thing you could do. Like, you wanted a kitchen, I built you a kitchen. There's just standard and finish and workmanship. It just means all sorts of different things to different people. So yeah, that's really, really interesting. And absolutely, you get what you pay for. Buy cheap, you buy twice, all day long. And then in the management, it's understanding what do you want to do. Do you want to be a project manager, a laborer yourself, or do you want to run multiple projects in the same time? How scalable is your property business? If you buy at the right price, you can afford the right consultants and work with some project managers. And most people I know do really well. They just don't get involved in the build anymore. They buy at the right price, so they have an easy life. They get professionals involved, and that works really well. I think everybody needs to go through the own process of doing their own refurb to learn a bit, things around deadline, logistics of getting the golden toilets, delivered on time. But yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot for that. I've got one question, and this might lead into a question we had yesterday from Ed Blacklet in the Facebook group. So you said, about how to get realistic figures, and this might put you on the spot a little bit, Martin. I apologize in advance. Learning the costing of things, work with Martin, we can ask you. So how does that work in principle? Do you run deal clinics, or do you know the cost of things up and on the country?
Yeah, so because I'm managing projects for other clients, I'm regularly seeing prices for things. So I try and keep my finger on the pulse as to where the prices are going. And I'm based in Kent, as I said, so my brain thinks in outer London and home counties type rates. But I know that, just from talking to people and looking at prices where I can, that, for instance, Birmingham, central Birmingham, same kind of prices as home counties. That includes Liverpool, Manchester, Coventry, Nottingham, the other cities, the Midland cities, are those kinds of prices. Now, if we just start working away from those cities, we know prices are going to come down a little bit. Not enormously. Materials are a little bit cheaper. Labour is cheaper. So it will make a bit of a difference. So when I'm doing budget, I do budgets with clients all around the country. I mean, this is actually an interesting thing with Guillaume asking the question. It's very much speaking a foreign language. What do you think in and what do you speak in? I think in home counties rates, and then I will give the prices slightly adjusted up or down, if necessary, to property investors based on where they're actually appraising that deal at the time. So you can do it all the way around the country. But again, this really, not for me, but for you guys, if you get really knowledgeable about one particular area, then you'll be surprised how quickly you've got that knowledge base of rates. And the day you've got a project that goes live is the day that you've perhaps got 4 prices from builders with lots of knowledge, lots of information, and you're flying at that point. It's the first one that's hard to get going.
Yeah. Then you build a benchmark. So Ed's got a 34-bed, quite a big deal. So maybe it's going to be complicated to go into the details just now. But maybe Ed, if you're on the call, which I think you are, see if you can book some time with Martin on the, which one of these whichever of this URL on the screen here. And
go to the refurbishmentmastery.com. There's a button to just book a call. We can book a free call and just clear off some loose ends, or we can talk about how I can help you on a longer call and train you.
Yeah, as I understand, Ed is quite experienced. He's got his own building team doing things, but this is a different ballpark, big project. So it'd be interesting to have a chat with you, actually.
Yeah.
Tom is asking, thank you, Martin. Question for you both. Or can we use property filter to find those property which are on the edge of being unmortgageable? So in your filters, you'll be looking for low EPC properties typically. So the E and the F and G's, sometimes. And you can also look for keywords like unmodernized or cash only. So these are the best, cash only or unmodernized. And then if you want to bringing, like sort of narrow it down even further, look for properties with very low EPCs. This works all day long. William, thank you, valuable presentation. Thank you, Martin and Guillaume. Phil, top-notch presentation as always. Thank you both. Paul, great content. Thanks, Martin and Guillaume. There's lots. Catherine, thank you. Michael Verma, can you outsource doing a schedule of work to a professional other than a QS? Very good question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. And sadly, sometimes, I mean, even a QS may not be the best person for some of our smaller projects. Consultants that have been trained to work on really big projects, I find sometimes go overkill on small projects, and they deliver you a 100-page document for a £50,000 refurbishment, and builders will be put off by that. The other professional you could talk to are project managers. So they'll definitely do them. Some architects will do them as well, but often architects will focus much more on the nice to haves, the fancy door handles and the styles of doors and paint colors and things, and sometimes not get too much detailed on some of the bits and pieces, the nitty gritty of function, as it were. But again, you can learn how to do that for yourself. And if you've got the time to learn how to do it for yourself, once you've written your first schedule of works, after the first one will take you ages, but after that, you can pretty much copy and paste, or you copy and paste and you just change the color of the worktop in the kitchen or things like that. So it will get faster and faster.
Awesome, thank you. And that's I really like what you say about these professionals can go overkill, because this is my story when we first met, Martin. So I don't know if you remember, but I first met you at a networking event, and I say, hey, Martin, I've been following you for a while, and I watched the YouTube. I got the book, and here is my 40-page schedule of works. I'm very proud of myself. And then you just shred it in pieces. Say, look, your builder is just not gonna look at all of that, so you need to make it a lot simpler. And it's where I had to unlearn a lot of these things I learned, building bridges and dealing with multi-million contract down to down to like the 50K refurbs and builders level. So you helped me to quite a bit with that, and really it's a lot simpler. What I've learned with Martin, it's a lot simpler than we sometimes want it to be, or we make it to be. So yeah, well worth looking at that. Richard, so we've got Rachel, thanks Martin. Richard, thanks Martin and Guillaume. Heather, what percentage do you need to pay at each stage? As I understand, if it says £5,000 a week, then on week 3 only £10,000 has been done. Or do you argue it without risking your builder running off? Sorry.
Okay, so I would never accept payment terms with a builder where it's a certain amount of money each week. I would agree the sequence that you're going to pay the builder, maybe every Friday or maybe every other Friday, maybe every month on a bigger project. And on those milestones, I would meet the builder and agree the amount of work that has been done. So if the builder goes really fast, they get paid more. If they go really slowly, they get paid less. So I would never tie it up to an amount of money per time, because that's how builders overcharge, overpay, and sadly some of them then disappear off into the sunset and you never see them again.
Yeah, rather than breaking it down into time and weeks, you wanna look at milestones. So rip-off is done, first fix of this is done, kitchen's been installed, and you'll have like 10 milestones like that, and you agree at the start, once something is done, they get paid for it, and they get incentivized to actually finishing stuff off. And then every week you assess, if it ticks the box or not, and again, keep it simple. Tom, thank you, Martin and Guillaume, very helpful. Alexandra, this has been a great session. Yeah, all of them are a great session, but it's great to have great guests. Ed, I'm afraid to say that I still use one of the online software. They have two where you can put postcode. Yeah. So there's some you can. So Ed was the one who's got the big deal. You can go on to you can go online and find the light refurb, price per square foot and things like that. But in my experience, this doesn't prevent you from being at risk of some surprises. Do you have some comments, Martin, on having benchmark or price per square foot per postcode? Because it's something we thought about bringing into Property Filter, but I have seen this being misleading before. So I don't know what you think.
So my view is, and if I just take you from the concept, you consider what kind of houses we're looking at. You know that in any one day, you could look at four or five houses that are all at different stages of repair, from one that is very close to falling down to one that actually needs very little work doing to it. Now, that's both ends of that spectrum need refurbishment. And again, if we're going to do some modification, sometimes we might just be putting in an ensuite or two to make it an HMO. Other times we're building an extension, we're moving the staircase, we're taking some walls down. So what you can see is there is no standard job. There is no standard starting point and there's no standard ending point. So therefore, anything we use as a standard rough rule of thumb in the middle is so open to being inaccurate that you might as well not bother with it at all. You can use rules of thumb for new build houses. That absolutely does work. But I wouldn't advocate it on a refurbishment because there are so many moving parts to a refurbishment.
Yeah, thank you. And also, Ed, you've got your own build team, so I'm sure you can figure out some, you'll know for yourself something that works quite well. I'm quite looking forward to you guys having a bit of a chat and see what comes up. Again, Ed is quite experienced, so it'll be quite interesting to hear what you guys come up with. Steve, if we use YPN and the project is in 2021, 2022, how much uplift should we apply on the prices?
A lot. So 2021 was when prices started rocketing. And to be honest, prices went high and a lot of them have now dropped back down again. So although you might have heard of 30% rises, there's very little that's probably 30% above 2021 now. And there's some things that didn't go up so much. I would be adding on 25%. That is probably a very rough rule of thumb. But the prices that really went up were concrete, timber and metal, plasterboard, whereas things like painting, carpets and things like that barely moved. So if your project is much more cosmetic side of things, it probably only 18-20%, but if it's a lot more heavy type stuff, 25 to 30% is what you want to be adding on.
Interesting. Yeah, and anyway, even if it's in the magazine, it's been, the project's been done a year ago, so you even if it's live, in the newest edition, you want to apply some margin on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Be careful to read when people have done some of these studies.
So Lars is saying, thanks, very useful. Rachel, awesome book, offer and course too. Thank you, exactly what I need. Ed, do you ever work on daily rates with builders? Personally, I don't, but
No, I wouldn't. You've got no control. The only thing that should ever be on daily rates or even hourly rates is kind of emergency call-out type work. But that's not building work. That's emergency maintenance because the tenant's pulled the front door off and you've got to get someone around to fix it. So, yeah, always a lump sum fixed price. Then you can manage your budgets accordingly.
The way I see it is it depends, Ed, you know, like if are you a building contractor or are you a property investor? If you're a building contractor and it's basically you wholesale hourly rates of trade here and there, and you bring them into like a lump sum price you offer to someone, that's the business you're in. You're a building contractor. If you're a property investor, you know, you want certainty of things, you want scale, you want to do multiple projects in the same time. And as soon as you get into daily rates, you need to you need to manage these guys, you know, like, and it depends what you want to do, what business you're in, really. Heather, I'm reading Martin's book, and it's addictive. Yeah, it's really good. Mark, do you recommend penalty clause concerning scheduled finishing time with the builder?
You can certainly have that conversation with them. By the way, they're not called penalty clauses. We call them liquidated damages, and they are a fair assessment of your losses. So if for instance, if you're going to rent the property out afterwards, you know what your loss in rent is per month, therefore per week, per day, and you can agree that with the builder. If the builder is delayed through not through your fault. So if you delay the builder, you need to agree a revised completion date. But if the builder is delayed, then you can invoke a liquidated damages clause. But be careful. My view is if a builder's worked flat out, done you a really good job and finished a couple of days late, I wouldn't hold it against the builder. Builders are eternally optimistic about how fast they can turn jobs around. It's the one thing that's still in my blood from when I was managing projects years ago, that I can be a little bit optimistic. So if a builder says a project's going to take him 8 weeks to finish, in your head, think 9 to 10. Don't ever disclose that, but think 9 to 10. If the builder works hard, then don't feel that you need to penalise them in any way. But certainly if the builder is not on site and you go to site and he's not there, ring him up and say, remember we agreed those liquidated damages. If you don't get a team back round there, I'm going to be invoking those. But sadly, sometimes builders at that point will walk off. So you have got to work out the best way of saying that and the best time to do that.
Yeah, we have these in our contracts for HMO refurbs and conversions, but the reality is we never use them. We use them more as a bargaining chip than anything. So when there's extra works and things, and we sort of waive them at the end as a gesture, and it comes into the balance against other things. So yeah.
That's it.
And then final question. So Raj asking, how much project management charge generally, like a percentage?
So it's difficult to charge a percentage because every project's different. If you want a rough idea for your budgets, then 10% of build cost is a good place to start. Bigger projects, that price will come down even closer to 6% of build cost. And on smaller projects, it could creep up 12, 13% of build cost. So use 10 as an average, but I personally quote all of my projects based on location, duration, and complexity. But use 10 as a good start.
Yeah. Awesome, Martin. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you all for being engaging and the great question we've had today. And indeed, thank you for joining us on today's Deal Finders Corner. Visit propertyfilter.co.uk, log on to your Property Filter account, check on the deal blueprint, define your goldmine area, engage with motivated sellers, assess properties in seconds, use Martin to plug in your build cost, load your pipeline and make deal, have an endless supply of deals, join the top 1% and become a high achiever deal finder. I hope you enjoyed today's Deal Finder Corner. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Lang. Cheers, Guillaume. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.